What's up, comic and pop culture fans? This is James with Midhunter Comics. There's been many great writers on Batman that continue to add so many iconic attributes and elements to the character. Tom King focused on tragedy. Mark Waid portrayed Batman as the ultimate planner. James Tynion focuses on Batman's use of gadgets and technology. Grant Morrison focuses on the weird history of Batman. Frank Miller focuses on the badassery and Batman's anger. Paul Dini fleshed out many of Batman's villains. Alan Moore provided a psychologically deteriorating basis behind Bat stories. Scott Snyder made Gotham into a character, and Jeff Loeb portrayed Batman as a detective, first and foremost. All these aspects make for a great Batman, however, if overused, can and have on occasion devolved into a frustrating trope for the title. Batman for the last decade has become, for example, so image-based, and has devolved into a super soldier, grumpy Gus, super planner, Mary Sue type figure in which nothing gets past him and he can just punch his way through anything, including our expectations. This may be because Batman is DC's greatest selling character at the moment, and people want to see Batman stump even the most clever of foes time and time again, but I think it loses the most basic essence and aspects of Batman, and that is of fear and horror. Let's rewind our clocks and look at this iconic page from the equally iconic Frank Miller story of Batman Year One. Ladies and gentlemen, he addresses the Gotham elite, who had been a leech on Gotham for years. You have eaten well. You have eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit. Your feast is nearly over. From this moment on, none of you are safe. In this moment, Batman is instilling fear into those who would have normally been considered the untouchable elite. This moment is a perfect representation of what Batman is about and the promise he made when he first donned the cowl. He dedicates his life into striking fear in the heart of criminals. Criminals not dissimilar to Joe Chill, who took his parents' life so many years ago. The entire basis of Batman's character is to prey and induce such terror into the minds of criminals that they never for a moment will consider the life of crime again. Yes, he's a great detective. Yes, he's highly intelligent and rich. All of these things. But at its core, he's a manipulator of fear, and a terrifying tragic figure that plays perfectly to the genre of horror. You see, Batman is supposed to be a legend, a bad rumor, something scary and horrifying that it almost seems like a boogeyman story to the scum of Gotham. The city of Gotham fears him almost as much, if not more, than the rogues. Those memes about getting a parking ticket in Gotham might be funny, but they're also surprisingly proof of a greater understanding of Batman's use of fear. The artist Kelly Jones explains this perfectly.
His thing is to scare people. If he has to beat you, he's kind of failed at that point. Basically, all he does is say, stop it. Mm-hmm. And the way he says it, the way he holds himself, that is enough.
His first weapon is intimidation and fear and superstition.
And the reason you know the Rogues Gallery are insane to a man is they keep doing it again. Yeah. Regular people, once he comes to regular people, regular criminals, they quit. The reason Gordon works with him and breaks your Fourth Amendment rights is there's no recidivism with regular criminals when Batman's there. Gotham, he can go to a gang and say, stop it, they stop it. Regular criminals don't go to Arkham Asylum. Regular criminals do their time and never do it again because of him. Batman's the guy in the room with you 10 minutes before you realize he's been in the room with you. And that's terrifying. That's just terrifying to me.
I mean, here's the thing. People see him and they think he's a bat. They think they've seen a giant bat.
Yeah.
Based on what, currently?
I think regular people in Gotham, I told Doug, I said, I think regular people in Gotham think he's one of the Rogues Gallery himself. They don't know he's good or bad, whatever. They just know to me, I said he's the baddest of all of them as far as regular people look at him. There's the Joker and the Scarecrow and all these people, but Batman's the baddest. Because why? They put a signal in the sky when he's out. Warning. And that's a warning to everyone. We know it's a call to come and get him for, you got to go see Gordon. But everybody in Gotham goes, oh, Jesus, lock your doors, be good, don't steal.
Everybody else doesn't realize what the bat signal is. They think it's something, they think it's a warning to criminals.
Yeah, and so to me, it's he's loose and watch out.
The fear specifically over Gotham's guilty idea is what makes a truly accurate Batman story. Let's take a look at the dated but classic Batman tale from Batman issue 250. While this story is nowhere near a horror story, it understands this mystical element to Batman. Bruce Wayne's on a camping trip with some of Gotham's orphaned and tough youth, and to scare one another, the kids start saying what they think this Batman could possibly be. Some think he is a legitimate bat roaming the night skies. One kid says it's just a man who comes off as scary and uses his gadgets to his advantage, which I think is unironically how most modern writers see Batman, sadly. And the last kid describes him as 10 feet tall, terrifying, and with bat-like powers. In each iteration, the kids describe their rendition as terrifying. Bruce, amused, uses this opportunity to scare the kids with the real costume, yet they remain unaffected by his reveal. And that's because it's the idea of Batman that's terrifying to those with evil in their hearts. Bruce deduces that the frightening image he's created may scare the guilty, but not the innocent youth. This is crucial. This plays with the concept that the guilty and the evil live in fear, and through that fear, the Batman becomes a terrifying, nightmarish entity. The best Batman stories incorporate this guilt-fear relationship. Let's look at Steve Englehart's poignant use of this in Detective Comics 439. Here's a 100-page Batman special from 1974, but it's the first story, the first 18 pages or so, that's memorable. This is a classic 70s Batman checking off all of the boxes. The script is especially strong, declaring his nightly duties as meeting darkness with darkness and a necessary instilling of terror into criminals. This is very Batman. A robbery goes wrong, resulting in a boy's mom being shot. As the husband wrestles with the shooter and almost has him, the getaway car pulls up and 3 other men shoot the husband, leaving a now orphaned boy sobbing on the street. Batman is immediately struck by this, as the exact same thing happened so many nights ago. He erupts in rage as he catches up with the getaway car atop the roof and awaits his turn to reveal himself. This issue clearly never has Batman say a word, and it's stories like this that really give us the silent nighttime guardian that we know today. And it helps to give him a more terrifying angle. One by one, he instills fear into each of the men, impossibly seemingly catching one by one as they escape, only to see Batman at every corner. You can see he's angry. His anger guides his hand as he takes out all the robbers but one, a younger boy who is in over his head and never wished to be caught up with murder. This last robber cries, and Batman can see his innocence despite being caught up with those men. Here, Batman's anger subsides as the narrative says, he has done his dark work, he has stalked vicious men with equal viciousness to strike terror into their hearts, but this sobbing boy does not deserve Batman's justice, and this creature of the night retreats to the shadows. Back at home, Bruce finds himself emotional. I love the narrative here as well. With the frosty birth of day, this haunter of darkness dies, leaving only a weary Bruce Wayne. And suddenly, sorrow explodes within him. He reflects on the boy crying in the street, seeing his parents murdered, and he reflects on the young robber crying for being wrapped up in the day's viciousness. I would go so far as to say that the best and most effective Batman stories center around this relationship of Batman's use of fear to his criminals, and also when that fear and ugliness gets reversed onto him. His character, his image, his essence is that of such extreme commitment to fear that when it gets flipped on him, makes it a compelling story. One of the first times fear being flipped onto Batman was used effectively in a Batman story was within the psychologically challenging miniseries The Cult. Batman is bound, starved, poisoned, and has been off-grid, fully brainwashed. Deacon Blackfire is a cult leader who instills fear into Batman of failing Gotham. Seeing Bruce stripped of his power and of his manipulation of fear, and seeing it used against him to show his failings, is extremely well managed here. The ability to penetrate Bruce's determination and willpower, stripping him down into losing his sanity, plays to the existential, psychological horror quite well, and is really one of the first times this horror aspect is used against Batman in a title. The complete loss of identity and use of the instilling of the guilt-fear complex against Batman shows he's just a man, capable of fear and not invincible. Yeah, this story is before the modern day Batman of complete inability to ever be outmatched or outthought. And frankly, it's much more interesting as a result. In fact, there's a lot of times that fear has been used effectively in Batman stories, so let's take a quick look. For starters, we have to mention the video games, specifically Arkham Asylum. This 2009 video game is a near perfect telling of a Batman story throughout. The claustrophobic atmosphere, the rogues gallery on full insanity and impervious to his fear, the use of lighting and jump scares to make the player uneasy, that absolutely terrifying Killer Croc chase sequence, the poisoning of Bruce's mind by Scarecrow to make him revisit his trauma. It has everything a Batman story should have in a fun, playable setting. Batman Begins by Christopher Nolan captures fear in the heart of criminals very well. Batman clearly is on a quest to most effectively take back the soul of Gotham and is trained to use fear to his advantage. This tracks with what we know of Batman's origin story. Returning to Gotham, he preys on the guilty. There's more than a few scenes that actually play out in a horror movie style quite well. My favorite scenes are when Batman's victims are doused in fear gas and see him for his raw eminence of fear directly and are terrified. That's what Batman's about. I did not enjoy Batman vs. Superman, but for a brief moment in the beginning of the movie, Batman is shown almost as an actual bat, which is a cool perspective moment that tricks the eye almost as if to say he actually is a bat, which is an effective use of showing the scary legend, myth of the Batman. But I think my personal favorite and clear winner of a Batman story that effectively accomplishes fear, we have to look at Batman from the mind of Kelly Jones and Doug Mensch. This writing and artist team saw Batman differently, but also more clearly than most did. They remembered that at its core, Batman is a noir-style, tragic character that spreads fear throughout Gotham. The guilty, fearful criminals feared Batman intensely through this mystical presence, but from within the stomach of Gotham would come some rogue villains so insane that they fell immune to Batman's intimidation.
The reason you know the rogues gallery are insane to a man is they keep doing it again. Regular people, once he comes to regular people, regular criminals, they quit.
That's why Gotham's villains work so well, is because they're a direct rejection of the fear that Batman uses on his nightly basis. It helps to make them, as a result, more terrifying as villains overall. Now, if we want to talk about horror, we have to bring up Red Rain, one of the most terrifying stories in the medium of comic books. Here, they took all the aspects of Batman and combined it into the world of a surprisingly accurate vampire lore. The result was like peanut butter and jelly. The Batman mythos combined near perfectly with vampire mythos to give an effective horror story for the ages. Red Rain was the first of 3 books that unfolded the tale of what we now know as Batman Vampire. They contain harrowing imagery, high contrast blacks, disturbing content, impossible foes, an outmatched Batman, and all in all, just a frightening premise. And it works. Not just because it spits fear back at Batman, but it shows Batman clinging to the fear over Gotham he's tried so hard to preserve. He's not the frightening, worried victim concerned about vampires in Gotham. He's intelligent, sharp, and unrelenting in his quest for knowledge and how to best defeat the head of the snake. You see, Batman can't have fear in his city other than his own. Whether it be vampires, Scarecrow, bomb threats from the Joker, or even just common thugs, it does not fly. Batman must be in control. He has to be the source of the fear. This dance of him trying to retain being the main source of fear, even after his villains learn that he doesn't kill, is what inspires him. His need for control is this defining element to Batman, and some stories, while not as blatantly obvious of a horror story such as Red Rain, incorporate this element of horror into the best Batman stories. In Batman Venom, Batman is faced with the fear of not being able to save a little girl. In Death in the Family, Batman is confronted with his greatest failure and complete loss of control when he failed to save Jason Todd. Gotham by Gaslight has Batman confronting a serial killer. And in Killing Joke, it's just him versus insanity. You see, when Batman loses his grip of fear that he maintains over Gotham, that's when things get scary. From 86 to 96, these deep-rooted horror elements were understood, But it seems in the last 2 decades that fear and his control over Gotham is harder to find. He went from being perceived as a myth and even being drawn from a stylized perspective to suggest that he may not even be a man, to an overemphasis on his suits and gadgets and super soldier style of being. He's focused on love and different themes other than fear, and plows through his rogues gallery with such predictable ease. He finds himself in outer space, battling alongside the toughest members of the JLA. He goes up against Darkseid and wins. He escapes all situations, even death. He's basically become a walking super soldier of untouchable predictability that always has a plan or gadget for any moment, who only shows emotion through anger or occasional sadness, which is a misrepresentation of a previous understanding of Batman. Whenever I see him played up to be angry or sad, it often feels like fan service because that's just what people have come to want. But if you look back at the moments when he feels those emotions, were when he lost control over his fear, which is what glued Gotham together. I think we need to stop focusing on one-liners, badass moments, and the cool gadgets, and start focusing more on what makes Batman Batman. Make him vulnerable. Put his grip of fear over Gotham to the test. Remind readers of the horror elements to this character. Let's not forget his vow to strike fear into the hearts of criminals.